Welcome to the most important week of the year for the podcast industry. Welcome to Podcast Movement 2025.
My name is John. I am with the Podhouse Productions. My company is a one-stop shop for podcasters looking for everything from ideation all the way up to podcast editing, producing, and publishing. And one of the biggest questions, even though I deal with a lot of editing, is how do I grow my show? And I think that's the question that many of us ask in the podcasting ecosystem. But there's a couple of different things that I have a little bit of a different take on from how to grow a show. And we're going to be talking about a bunch of those different things today. But first and foremost, the one thing I always try to underscore is there are a lot of different tools that you can use in podcasting to grow your show. But as most of us know, the biggest thing that's always going to grow your show is making sure that the quality of the podcast that you're putting out is reaching your ideal audience and making sure that what you're talking about and how you're speaking about it resonates with an audience. So all of these tools that we're going to talk about are going to be taking that show that you're already producing and being able to get it into more eyes and ears. So there's a couple of things that we are going to talk about here, and we're going to start off with probably one thing I don't see talked about a lot in the podcasting ecosystem. So one of those is getting your show into media outlets. Now, a lot of the times we talk about promoting your podcast, we're trying to get our podcast into a new set of eyes and ears. But one thing we don't speak about are the different sources that we can use to get our podcast out. So what are some of these different media outlets? You may listen to podcasts that are in your niche. You may also be familiar with lots of news sites or publications that publish different podcast content. They may pull quotes from an episode, or they may go ahead and pull snippets from, let's say, a YouTube short or something like that that a podcaster has produced. Now, getting your show into a media outlet can be a really powerful tool to get your podcast into more eyes and ears because, again, these are outlets that already have an established audience. One of the podcasts that I work with is a wine reseller, and their podcast has done lots of different things in the ecosystem to grow them into being a leader in their space. But one of the things that they do is they get their podcast into wine publications pretty consistently. And when they do that, one of the deals that they got just from being in that publication got them $20,000 in revenue in a month. So for that, it can be a really powerful tool to get your podcast into an audience that, quite honestly, is going to be the audience that you want here. So what are some things that you can do? First off, if many of you are familiar with a lot of these programs that are out, your Descripts, your Riversides now, they do a great job at pulling transcripts and pulling quotes about your show. Remember, many of us may have podcasts that are a half hour long, an hour long, 45 minutes long, but you don't have to use the full podcast up front to be able to get it into one of these publications. You can find different quotes that you can pull to get into these different news sites. And we're going to talk about this in terms of clips in a second here too. So the first thing, obviously, when you're trying to market into a news outlet is know your niche, right? If you're going and you're promoting, let's say you want to get your podcast, your sports podcast, into a couple of different publications. Know what you're talking about, know the specific sport that you're talking about, and the more you can dial in on your niche, the more you're going to be able to find outlets that are going to highlight your content. And one thing I like to do too is this, a lot of what you're hearing me talk about right now is what a PR company can do. You may bring a PR company in to already have these contacts. You may bring in a PR company to promote your podcast into that ideal audience. But if you don't, these are the exact steps that they're going to take too. They're going to identify a lot of these key players at these outlets, and they're going to go ahead and say, hey, I have all of this content, I have this great show, and as it gets released, I want to go ahead and put it into your hands and see if we can get it into your media blitz here. How do you connect with people? We're at Podcast Movement right now. And you're hearing it all the time. You're doing it right now. You're networking with people in your niche. You're networking with people in the podcasting ecosystem. But there are lots of different conferences. There are lots of different places that you can go to continue to build your audience. So just continue to network and find, when you're looking at these different blogs, for example, you're looking at these different media outlets, look at the names and look at the contact information. a lot of these times these media outlets do want to have more content. Because remember, not just high-level content or not just low-level content, but all content is something that can be picked up and used for them to get even more foot traffic to their outlets. So always network and always find out who you can go ahead and send this content to. So you have your list. You say, hey, I'm going to go ahead and send this to you. But what is the likelihood of your content getting featured? If you make it easy for a lot of these media outlets to turn around and say, hey, I may not even have to listen to the full of the podcast to understand really highlighted parts, make their job as easy as it can for them to take your content and drop it right into, let's say, a blog post or a news outlet, and the likelihood of you getting your content highlighted is that much higher. What I like to do when I do this for clients or even for my own show is I like to pull at least 2 or 3 quotes from the show. If we have about a half hour of a podcast, you can probably find 30 great quotes, right? And you can do lots of things with these, like you can create quote images, quote graphics, but all you need to do is plain text, pull out the quote, pull out the person that said it, and if you can find the exact timestamp in your show, whether that's a YouTube short, whether that's directly into a YouTube episode, or whether that's right into an Apple Podcast or Spotify link, you can go ahead and link directly to that point so they can hear it in context. And you also want to provide CTAs for them to be able to say, hey, if you liked what you heard here, go check out the rest of the episode here. So when you reach out to a lot of these media publications, you can turn around and say, hey, it came from this podcast. If you like this, here are my socials. Here's the episode it came from. Go and subscribe. And a lot of the times, these media outlets want you to share that it was in their outlet as much as you want them to do the same. So long as you're giving them all of this content that makes it easy for them to take it and drop it in, it becomes real easy for them to share your content. One thing I'll also say is if you're familiar with a lot of these outlets, one of the podcasts that I run is my own, which is a wrestling podcast. We talk about wrestling and music. It's called Ropes and Riffs. And one of the things that I do is I look in the news cycle. If WWE is on Mondays, Tuesday is going to be a day where they have all the follow-up from that. So maybe I don't go ahead and send this out on Tuesday. Maybe I go ahead and send mine out on Wednesday, or a time where maybe there's not a high-level wrestling show going on. The likelihood of one of their editors seeing that and putting it into their publication goes up simply because I know what their published schedule is too. And you don't have to hand scribe all these things anymore. Like I said, Riverside makes it really easy. All these transcript tools that you have, even if you throw your podcast into like a ChatGPT or Gemini, they do really great jobs at pulling your transcript and pulling quotes for you. You don't even have to have the full transcript. You could just say, find 3 or 4 great quotes in here. And for those who may have used these AI tools before, you already are familiar with the power that they have here. This has a lot of information on the screen. At the end of the presentation, I'm going to have a QR code where you can download the entire slides that I used here. But I wanted to show you an example of something that I did here. So I interviewed the people for my show that did Cody Rhodes' theme, who's a wrestler in WWE. They've done lots of different themes for those who may be familiar with them. Their name is Downstate. And at the top, what I said is, hey, this is who was on the show. Here are some things that we talk about. If you share any of my content, please go ahead and link back here. And if we see here, quote number 1, quote number 2, I also have a link to the source to the podcast. So what I did was I wrote down the specific quote here in text, but then I also went ahead and pointed to the specific podcast where that shows up in. That way it makes it easy for them to just grab that episode and say, in this episode. Why is this all important? Because what happens is then you get automatic traffic back to your show. What I also have at the end is I have a little write-up about the episode, source to the podcast again, and then a little bit about my show too. Because you could send them all the quotes that you want, but if you don't give them a little bit about your show, then there's a chance that they may not pick up on it. And you see down at the bottom here how there's a couple of different links that I clicked out to. So there's these 3 right down here. There's a media kit that I have, which we can talk all about media kits for all days to grow your show too. But you see that there's a lot of different content here that makes it real easy for them to say, quote number 1 here. And the more quotes you provide, the more of a likelihood that they'll be able to continue to use that later through the week, through the month, and even through the year if they find more chances to repurpose that. And as you see, they've published a lot of my content here. This is an outlet called Fightful. They post all about UFC, MMA, WWE, AEW. all the fun combat sports. But I've been really happy that they've been able to pick up a lot of my content here. And it's simply just by, after my episode, pulling those quotes and giving that information to them. Now, a lot of our podcasts also have guests on. And I think that with podcasting, one of the things that's cool is it's a conversational medium in a lot of ways, right? We have a lot of people on the show. We have lots of guests on our show to give their expertise and their experience. And I think a lot of us always want to be able to say, hey, we'll go ahead and co-promote if you co-promote us as well. And we know that being able to work with somebody else helps you achieve a much bigger growth platform for your podcast by using additional audiences. But I think a lot of the times where a lot of people struggle with this is you have someone on the show, and then it becomes, hey, did you share it? Did you share it? You feel bad if someone doesn't share the content also, right? But what leveraging your guest audience can do is, especially if you think of your podcast as a brand and not so much just as your podcast, you can use things like social media for collaborations. And let's say you're a starting out podcast and you decide, hey, I was able to get in contact with somebody who has a following of, let's say, like 100,000 people. When they go ahead and they share the clips from the show, you're going to be able to collaborate with them so it shows up on both of your feeds. Their audience now is set up to go back to your content. There's a lot of different ways that you can use the guest audience in order to help grow your show and to help them grow theirs as well. And never underestimate the fact of, if you're just starting out, never underestimate how many people are willing to come and say, yes, I'd love to be on your show. And never underestimate that even if you think that your numbers are small, the fact of you promoting them can mean the world to them and can mean an extra bunch of eyes on their product as well here. So when it comes to getting guests on your show and leveraging their audience, I like to kind of set up a few things that are going to set you up for success. The first thing is, before you even hit record and have them on the show, let your guests know what your expectations are. Hey, we're going to go ahead and hop on whatever it is, Riverside. We're going to hop on Zoom, and we're going to record this podcast. But once it's done, I'm going to go ahead and create, let's say, 3 to 4 short clips. I'm going to pull the transcript. I'm going to go ahead and get these quotes for you. The one thing I'm going to ask you is, before the show or after the show, if you can go ahead and follow the show on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, on Instagram, wherever you want to direct people to go. Because then going into the podcast, it doesn't feel weird like you're trying to catch them afterwards, right? Once you've gotten them on the show and they hit that end button, many of us know how hard it can be to get that person back, right? My co-host for my industry show, PodBiz, Norma Jean, who many of you here may also know from the podcasting industry, one thing that she does that I really think is great is, when we go to get guests on the show, she has a whole Google form that we have people fill out. And it's like 5 or 6 questions. Who are you? What's your social media handle? And also upload a photo. Who are some other guests that you think would be great to get on the show? And once they get that email, or once they submit everything, they then get an email that says, hey, follow us here. Here's all the things that we expect. So before we even hit record, we already know that there's this collaborative relationship for LinkedIn, for Instagram, and where we produce and put out our shows. Also, if you're using templates already for many of the things that you do, you see here how I've used template emails and signatures to keep your requests and social handles consistent. If you are using a Gmail email, for example, create a signature that's not just, for example, just your name, your podcast, that's it. What you can do is you can create a full signature that has like 4 or 5 different paragraphs and use that. So when you email somebody, you can say, hey, you're going to be on the show. Here are the things that you can do before time. Here's the room we're going to be in. Here's the promotional outlets I want us to follow. Here's my expectation. Before you hop on, make sure you have headphones so there's no mic bleed. All of the things that you usually do. But having a template, make sure that you can have all of that sent to them already. And when you are promoting your content, you're going to hear me kind of use a lot of things that are related to visual cues, because I do a lot with quote cards and video and things like that. But on anything that you put out where it could be collaborative, put a subscribe watermark on your content. With a lot of what I do, I'll put a subscribe button on the top right corner or top left corner. Just has to pop up for 2 or 3 seconds. But what you can do is just let people know, hey, during the clip, there's just this little thing up at the top that whatever outlet you're listening on or viewing, you go ahead, you click that, and you're subscribed to the show. You have to always let your audience know how they can support you, and the CTAs that you have are really critically important. But if you don't tell people what those CTAs are or where they can find you, then no one's going to activate on anything that you have. So the other thing I'll always say is when you send these emails out and you ask for this collaborative process with people, you can always be persistent, you can be respectful, but always be kind, right? There will be a lot of people who want to do these things, they want to collab with you. But there may be some people who the time in their schedule or they don't run their podcast or whatnot. You always want to be persistent, be kind, and be respectful. So what I've always told people is expect nothing, ask for everything, and just be grateful for the results that you get. Because you have no idea how far that goes. So you hear me talking a lot about social clips here too. Social clips can go real far in terms of being able to grow your show and grow your podcast. And it also, think about the amount of time that we spend listening to shows now too. If we can have 2 or 3 minutes of a short clip that's like, hey, here's a really powerful part of the show. If you like more, go listen to the full episode. If you have 4 or 5 of those, you're respecting your audience's time. And at the same time, you're creating content, which if someone searches specifically for a specific topic, it's going to go ahead and direct them right to that. So if you interview somebody and you have a specific topic that maybe comes in 20 minutes later, someone has to listen 20 minutes to your episode to get into it, as opposed to having that clip pulled out. So it also allows you to have catchier snippets as opposed to just having someone have to listen to a full hour of your content. I want to listen to a full hour of your content. You want people to listen to a full hour of your content. But sometimes people may not have the full time in order to do that. But sometimes that shorter content can also perform better, like we talked about. It's a little bit more SEO-centric. It's a little more focused on that specifically. And a lot of the times when I think about using something like social clips, I think about it being about under 20 to 30 seconds is what works best for a lot of people. And usually that first 7-second time should be the catchiest. There's so many tools that you can use out there right now that make it real easy, like a Riverside or an Opus Clips. I use a combination of Riverside and CapCut because Riverside does a great job at getting these tools all squared up. But CapCut I like because, let's say, again, going back to the wrestling thing, let's say I want to have a video where the guys from Downstate are talking about writing Cody Rhodes' theme, but I want to have a little snippet of him walking to the ring from WWE and WrestleMania because that looks cool. And what I'll do is I'll bring them both into CapCut and just merge the file that way too. So being able to leverage social clips, in my opinion, is one of the biggest ways to grow in today's podcasting market. Because also the thing with audio podcasts is audio podcasts are great, but there's no social link out like there is on like an Instagram, on a Facebook, on TikTok, or one of those things. So leveraging social media and social clips can only do and benefit your show in a great way. Now, with the newsletters here, how many of us have been to podcasting conventions before and heard about newsletters being a great strategy? Okay, cool. Yeah, so newsletters are a really powerful strategy for growing your show. So because we're running a little bit short on time here, I'm going to go ahead and step off to the side here, and anyone that has a little bit more additional questions about newsletters, we can dive a little bit deeper into it. But newsletters are going to be a way to where you can activate your most ideal audience. But the thing is, that gives you the ability to use what I call smart CTAs, which basically, instead of you just saying, hey, subscribe everywhere, what are you doing and where do you want to direct people to take action for your show? What are you doing with your audience in order to have them help you grow your show? So let's think about this. If you create additional content, you can take your audience comments and turn them into short clips, right? If you're trying to think about, hey, how can I grow my show even more? I can go ahead and ask you to leave a 5-star review, and when you do that, I'll go ahead and shout you out on the show. And if you're trying to direct new audiences to take targeted actions, you can build a newsletter or build your podcast by saying something like, hey, if you go ahead and you subscribe to my show, I'm going to go ahead and give you a gift card or enter you into a contest to win a gift card somewhere else. So there's lots of different examples of using CTAs instead of just subscribe everywhere to be able to pull on that. So I have a couple of things that I want you to consider generally when you're talking about these smart CTAs here. So I know we are cutting right up against time. I will be able to answer some questions over here too. I tend to write a lot on some of these slides, but I like to give you guys a lot of information here. So if you do have any further questions too, you can scan the QR code there and just fill out a little bit of information, and you can download today's presentation. There'll be a link that you have the opportunity to download. If you can't download it, email me and I'll go ahead and I'll send that to you. And you can also schedule a call with me. Like I said, part of what I do is the ideation, the growth, and I want to see you guys, the podcasters, do your best work. So go ahead and schedule a call with me. Feel free to download today's presentation. And thank you guys for coming to my presentation today.